Hello, welcome to another episode of the Horror Vision Horror Podcast. I'm Sean,
I'm John.
And I'm Ray.
and joining us today, writer director of All You Need Is Death, which is right now rentable on Amazon Prime, Mr. Paul Duane. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm very happy you asked me. I mean, I met you guys at Beyond Fest last year, and it was, it's great to reconnect and it's great to be here. Thank you very much.
Just super thankful to have you. I mean, Sean and I went to go see the film at Beyond Fest, which I didn't know was the real premiere. I saw that according to the Beyond Fest website. It was actually the first time it was screened, and I remember sitting in the theater, and it was just to give anyone listening an idea of what else was out there. Like, this was the same year that we saw Where Evil Lurks, and
When Evil Lurks.
this was easily my favorite film. And not to talk bad. I'm not saying anything bad about the movie. I'm just saying, like, that's the level of this film. I feel like
Yeah.
I just love the film, and I was blown away when the moderator started asking you questions afterward. I remembered looking at Sean, and I didn't even think I'm going to ask him. I just said I'm going to tell him in my head. I just turned to him and I said, if I get a chance, I'm going to ask him to be on the podcast. And he went, dude, yes. And so when the moderator was done, you happened to be in the lobby talking to people. And I just went up and I said, hey, we're on this podcast. We talk about horror movies. Would you come on the podcast and talk about this movie? Because I love this and I want more people to see it. And you were so gracious and nice. And like most people have been at Beyond Fest and creators. And you said yes. And it's been 8 months. And when I brought it up about 2 or 3 months ago, you were still down. So from the bottom of my heart, appreciate it so much.
Thank you. The only thing I like more than talking about horror movies is talking about myself. So,
So this checks both boxes, and we are happy to have you here to check both those boxes. So first, Paul, like I want to talk about. So we ended up when we did connect that night, like Ray said. I remember you saying, well, so the and like Ray, I didn't realize that the Beyond Fest screening was the world premiere, and I know you said come March we're going to be bringing it back to the States, and you had a couple shows lined up, and we were going to target for right around that. So talk about how was the world premiere for the film at Beyond Fest? Like, how did that go for you?
I mean, God, it was. I mean, for a start, it was the first time the film had ever been projected. We didn't have any test screenings. We had no time. So, like, literally, I think I got a chance to quickly look at a few images before an hour before the screening. So, first time anybody there saw it projected was the first time I saw it projected in front of an audience. So that was nerve-wracking, but Evram Ursoy, who's one of the people who runs Beyond, was just incredibly supportive and is a marvelous human being. And so he made it very easy. I mean, I love Beyond Fest. It's a festival for fans. It's a festival for the audiences. It's much more about the audiences than it is about the filmmakers, which is it's the way to have it. So all I remember is this blur of absolute tension, and then going to a bar and getting hammered afterwards with a couple of guys from XYZ Films and everyone from the festival, and feeling this immense sense of relief that the film was out there in the world. I didn't have to worry about it anymore.
Coming to hook up with XYZ Film, I feel like they are really like a gathering force in the genre and distribution.
Well, I can't say enough good things about XYZ. My experience of working with them has been that rare thing in the film industry of working with people who love cinema, love movies, love the genre, love physical media, love all the things I love. How it happened was I self-financed the film, and I kind of thought I had a script that I knew I could just about make for about 150,000 euros, and that's at a professional level, professional crew. We weren't trying to do it on a. I mean, I've been making films for a long time, so I didn't want to, put myself in a position of doing anything less than professional. So I thought 150K, I can get it made, and I had like 115. So my first thought was I got to try and find some investors to invest in my film. So I put together a business plan. So for a business plan, the first thing you need to know is what's the possibility of this film making any money. So I needed to find out what streaming services might pay for a low budget horror movie with no stars. So I asked a couple of friends who are producers and stuff, and I asked and one person said, you know, you should talk to Todd at XYZ. He's really knowledgeable and he's really friendly. So I emailed Todd and I said, got a couple of questions. We did a Zoom. He asked me about the film. He gave me some numbers that were helpful. And then he said, do you mind if I ask, can I read your script? And I said, oh man, you don't want to read this. This is just a little tiny Irish film. It's not like your kind of thing. And he was like, no, 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 I'd really like to read the script. So I said, sure. So I sent it to him. And a week later, or 10 days or whatever, I got an email back going, I really like the script. Do you mind if I send it up the line here? Let some other people read it. And I was like, well, yeah, sure. It's your funeral, you know, go for it. And he did. And they all really liked it. And then when we were shooting, I had my editor put together a few scenes, including some, you know, with previs VFX and stuff. We had two scenes I thought were particularly good. So I sent them to Todd. He was at Sundance. I can imagine them sitting around a table at Sundance with a few friends watching it on their phones. And within about 24 hours after that, they said, we're in. We want to give you an MG. They gave me, it was a small guarantee. It was, you know, MG is what distributors give you for the rights to your film. It was not a lot of money, but it was enough money to get us over the line to get the film finished, which is a miracle. And as a result, the film exists. If they hadn't come on board, God knows where I'd be right now. And they have been incredibly supportive. Like I say, this is a weird little niche film. This is not Talk to Me. It's not Smile. It's not, you know, it's not. It doesn't have the go wide potential that a lot of, you know, small horror films seem to have. But they really they love it and they're on board and they're help and hopefully we have a long working relationship together. We're talking about a few more projects. So yeah, I can't say enough good things about them. Great guys.
That's awesome. I mean, just to give the audience a perspective, like because I just looked up how much that is. That's about $160,000. So if anyone's
Mhm.
out there, I mean, watch this movie, people, and see what that amount of money can do. Because you say it's a niche film. It is a niche film. It's a full horror movie, but it's fantastic. It's well acted. It's well made. It looks crisp. It I you know this is what you can do for that amount of money with the right talent, and like your actors are
Yeah.
great, like they might be no name people, but they're fantastic. So
Yeah.
this is what you can do for that kind of money, and that kind of with if you have the kind of talent and drive, and it's a great movie.
I've been working in the industry a long time, so I have friends, I have connections, and a lot of people worked on the film for deferred fees. A lot of the high end, the sound recorders, the editor, various people like that. You know, I'm in a privileged position to be able to do that. Not everybody can do it. I just felt at this point in my life I had to pull out every favor I could to make this movie because if I didn't make this movie, I was gonna, you know, I've been trying to make a horror movie for the last 25 years and I've had no luck getting anybody to fund any of my crazy ideas. So I had to put my money behind myself and gamble on it, you know, and that's what worked out.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, oh, I'm gonna totally blank. Sean probably remember her name, but um the director of Tigers Are Not Afraid, who did the latest season of
Oh, he's Lopez.
Lopez.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
She worked with XYZ as well. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard she's amazing.
Yeah, she when she made Tigers Are Not Afraid, like she didn't have like a whole lot of support, and like she wanted to make a horror movie, and she wasn't known for horror in Mexico, but she was like, I really want to make a horror movie. I like horror, and she made it, and it just happened to be seen by her idol. Help me out, John. I'm totally blanking on his name.
Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, and he loved it, and then he was like, I want to produce it, and off the strength of that film, she got Night Country. So I think it's worth it to put yourself into your passions, like, and it's on screen. It's fantastic. Like,
Thank
you
you.
know, it's such a
Thank
good
you.
film.
One of the things I was thinking about, but first of all, I really, really loved the film. But one of the things I was thinking about when I was watching it was just sort of how annoyed sometimes I get at people who try to just demarcate horror into like a gazillion different subgenres and use those subgenres as sort of a way to rehabilitate horror, in through their own lens. And watching your film, Paul, I was like, yeah, this can be categorized as a folk horror film, but really by and large, this is an excellent horror film,
Yeah.
period, end of. So I'm just curious, what does horror mean to you?
Oh man, I mean, I grew up reading old issues of Famous Monsters and Creepy and Eerie, and I was a 70s kid, so that stuff kind of like, there was the kind of a really interesting period when films like Jaws were in cinemas, and I was like 10, I think, when Jaws came out. And Jaws is a horror movie, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's a full-on horror movie, but it was a hugely popular movie. So I was lucky enough to come up and be aware of cinema during the period when horror kind of went mainstream. You had Jaws, you had The Shining, you had The Thing. There's probably others I've forgotten. Big movies. And it never left me, the love for the genre and the love for being scared or being amazed by the different ways that somebody could scare you or could make you feel uneasy or disturbed. So, it's never been. I mean, you mentioned about categories and stuff. I mean, folk horror, it's a nice, fun kind of category to play with, but it didn't exist until I don't know when the first time somebody mentioned folk horror was probably 15. I don't know who invented the term, but it wasn't there. Certainly when I saw The Wicker Man, nobody called it folk horror. It didn't exist. So all these things, it's a constantly changing thing. And in a way, when I did All You Need Is Death, I cynically kind of went, well, there's one aspect of folk horror that nobody has really done, which is to lean on the folk music and ballad end of it, which is something I know a lot about. And I thought, why not use the term folk horror as in the way Larry Cohen would and do a kind of make it into, you haven't seen this kind of folk horror before, and that's a hook. Because when you're making a low budget film with no stars, you need a hook. You need something to kind of drag the audiences in. You can't just depend on your cool idea. It has to be something you can pitch in a sentence. And it kind of seems to be working.
That's awesome. I was actually going to ask you about that, about how you made your focus on a film like focuses so much on like an oral tradition and a curse being tied up in a song that way.
Well, it was a kind of a thought process. So the first thing is there's a huge musical wave happening in Ireland, which is really, really interesting, where a lot of younger musicians who are coming from death metal and electronica and all kinds of niche musical forms are using traditional Irish music and turning it into something really, really interesting and really 21st century and really young. Some people call it doom folk. There's no real name for it. And one of the major bands in this area is this band Lankum, who are all from Dublin, and their music, just sounds like, as soon as I heard it, I was like, man, this has got to be the music for a horror movie. And then I kind of thought, well, I don't want somebody else to do that. I want to do that myself. I don't want to be sitting there going, I wish I'd. So, that was in the back of my mind. And then when I made the decision to put everything I had in behind making a low budget horror feature, as I said, I was thinking, well, what's a hook? What's an interesting thing? And I thought folk horror, folk music, ballads. Yeah, maybe there's something in that. And I traced that and I followed that idea until I got to the idea of, you know, horror movies need some kind of gimmick. In, The Evil Dead, you got the Necronomicon. There's often a sort of and I kind of went, well, the song can be the gimmick. The song can have the secret, can contain the curse, and started to look into things about like languages that were dead in Ireland that could be used in sort of a spooky Lovecraftian way, and then discovered that everything I was imagining actually was true. There is, a language like that, and it does exist, and we could actually use it. We could speak it. We could make it part of the film. So that kind of one thing led to another, and it all snowballed into being this kind of crazy, thing that you've seen. But that was the seed of it all. Really, was the music.
That's very cool.
I find that really, really interesting because two things there. So first of all, Lankum, that's where composer Ian Lynch is from, correct?
Yes.
Man, I just last night happened to see that Invada Records put a pre-sale up for the sound, snap that up immediately. His score is just so unbelievable. And so when you say this kind of movement where you've got people coming over, especially from like the black metal and whatnot, and incorporating these folk traditions, I feel like this movie perfectly visually represents that. And to me, that's where like metal has gotten really interesting, the stranger it's gotten. And that is one of the strangest offshoots. And I just feel like right up to that final song when the credits roll, there's elements of black metal, there's elements of folk, there's elements of like noise and composition. And I feel like that is the sonic texture to your movie, partially because of Ian Lynch's score, but then also that song is just unbelievable. It is so like it has been in my head. I don't know that it'll ever go away, or at least not anytime soon. And
Imagine how I feel. I got to listen to it hundreds of times.
it made me think about the way that that affects the characters, right? And are you familiar at all with like the William Burroughs, like the word virus kind of thing?
Oh yeah.
Because I feel
Oh yeah.
like that has to be a kernel of where you drew
Yeah.
inspiration from for this.
Yeah, the idea, I mean, I love that Cronenberg ending, that kind of thing, like at the end of Shivers, where you see all the infected going out into the world to spread the disease. And that was in my head. And I just kind of thought, well, maybe the virus isn't a parasite or it could be it could be a tune. It could be in music. Isn't that, and that seemed to me to be a really, an idea nobody had done, and an idea that, I mean, I was very specific about making this an Irish film. Um, and there's nothing more Irish than music. I mean, we're a musical country. So
Mhm.
rather than kind of reaching and doing a kind of a vaguely American or British or Eastern European thing in, kind of, well, here's the most possible, most traditionally Irish thing we could possibly do. Let's turn it into something really deeply scary, disturbing, and horrific. And that's the fun thing about making a horror movie. You can take things that people cherish and make them awful and scary.
I love you. I love
That's a great call.
Just like what you did with the title itself, you're taking like, something familiar, the Beatles, and you're just completely defamiliarizing it and turning what is traditionally this sort of warm and fuzzy, kind of Beatlemania into like this uncomfortable space. It's just great.
Well, that was just because I really liked that movie Edge of Tomorrow, and it was based on a manga called All You Need Is Kill, and they didn't use the title. I was like, Jesus, guys,
Nice.
that's one of the great titles. And I just went, if you're not going to use it, I'll fucking use it.
I'm glad they
Great
didn't use
call.
it.
I find it fascinating that like how the way that the curse is like triggered is that it's fine when the women have heard it, but once it's Alex who hears it, that's when it kicks in, and it doesn't just kick in for the two people that are there. It kicks in for Anna, who's not even near them when it happens. Um, in that great montage, like we see what they're going, what Alex and Agnes are doing, but then it cuts to Anna his performance is just dour, just so sad, and you're like, wow, it kicked in, and it's kicking in hard for her too. Um,
Yeah,
and I really thought that was so interesting. But um, one of the things that's I think is interesting is that choice to make Alex a foreigner, and the way that all their names start with A.
yeah.
So why what was part of that choice? And how do you feel like that spiders into the bigger concept of the film? Like how you, I mean, all their names are Alex, Agnes, Anna, and
Yeah.
he's a foreigner. I think if I
Okay.
remember correctly, he's
The
Bosnian, correct?
Yeah, well, it's not specified in the film, but he is Eastern European. The actor took the accent. He worked with a Ukrainian guy to get the accent. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
answer the simplest question first, the accent thing is purely, and this, as well as the fact that the character has a stammer. Basically the character becomes unrecognizable in the second half of the film, and you don't see his face for a lot of the time. So I was like, well, how do you make the audience absolutely certain that same character, accent, stammer?
Oh,
So
that's
it's pure.
brilliant.
It's
Yeah.
purely just practicalities. With the characters' names all starting with the same letter. Uh, I hate screenwriting manuals, and one of the rules screenwriting manuals tell you is never give your character's name starting with the same letter, because it'll confuse the poor executive producers who are reading your script, and they might
That's
lose the
genius.
track. And I was like, "Fuck you!" And also, I wasn't showing my script to any funders really, because I was making it myself. So I was like, well, I'm going to call all these. It's kind of again a slightly Burroughs Cronenberg thing. Actually, it's J.G. Ballard. It's Ballard always has characters who have kind of really sort of bland names. He'll call characters James Ballard. He'll call characters by very anodyne kind of names. And I really like that sort of slight dehumanization, and also the fact that they all end up, well, spoiler alert, the characters do kind of become, the three characters become one character, one creature by the end.
Yeah.
So that's kind of part of that. But I just thought it was fun, and you know, um, what was the other question? Was there another question in there?
Oh, just
There
the
was a.
choice to make him a foreigner, but you answered
Oh,
that.
that was it. Yeah, I answered that. Yeah. So yeah, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, I'm really, really curious, like, when I just not only just sort of like how rooted this was, in other horror films, but rooted in just how Irish it really, really was, just like at its core. And I rather than kind of pick apart like a lot of references that I see, I'm just sort of curious, like what were sort of some of the main um, influences that drove you while you were either writing the film or just working on it, you know, day by
You
day.
mean you mean specifically in terms of the Irishness of it, or?
Yeah, just just in terms of
Well,
Irish folk
well,
legends or.
I mean, I'm Irish, and I'm very conscious of, I mean, I've lived in different places, but I'm very conscious of the culture here. So I think that came from me. But there's a lot of stuff from different. I mean, like I just made up a lot. There's a lot of stuff in it that's just sort of completely made up. It's not based on the ballad scene, the music stuff, the stuff. There's an awful lot of Irish musicians playing smaller and some quite large parts in the film. Um, so it's full of the kind of texture of Irish culture. But the story, I mean, I went out of my way to make sure we didn't use any visual. I'm so sick of every time you see an Irish film, there'll be a panning shot across like barren landscapes of fields and stone walls and a pipe going in the distance. And it's so
or
cliched. So I
or
kind of
cheesy
I
Easter
made it in
eggs.
urban. Yeah, yeah, chieftains and stuff. So I kind of went for urban decay and kind of Kiyoshi Kurosawa type locations and found all the most really dilapidated, horrible, rundown buildings I could possibly find to shoot in. The opposite of what you'd expect from, a kind of a in inverted commas Irish film. So yeah, I think the Irishness is just inherent in my interest in the culture, really.
Love it.
That's very cool. I mean, that was actually one of the questions that I was going to ask is like, I like that you touched on the Kurosawa element. Is that like not only just talking about what influences might be existing in this film, but also like who do you feel are like your artistic influences? Who do you like pull from, or who do you just like love as far as like horror goes, or just in film that you just like
Oh man.
that's who I try to pull from
Okay.
and do things like.
That's a big okay. If you look on my letterbox, my top four films are Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, which is technically not a horror film, but I think it's a horror film. It's a film I've seen 40, 50 times. I love it. I never get sick of it. Only Angels Have Wings by Howard Hawks, which is definitely not a horror film, but Hawks
Oh
is
wow.
my favorite director, I think, of all time. Cure by Yoshi Kurosawa, and God Told Me to by Larry Cohen. So that's kind of the four that kind of triangulates it. I love the crazy profusion of ideas and fun, and in a way, Larry Cohen movies, he can contain three or four different ideas that don't make sense together, but he just makes them. He just kind of jams them together, and you kind of have to just go with it. And I love that.
Yeah, that movie is especially batshit crazy.
Oh my God, that film was batshit. And I've watched it so many times. And you'll get to a scene in the middle and go, my God, this is terrible. This is the worst scene I've ever seen. But then by the end of the movie, I'm like, I love this movie all over again. Um, Whereas with Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure, it's just one of those perfect films that I think is one of the greatest horror films made in my lifetime by far. And it was a film I showed to every single person in a position of responsibility on the shoot, including the actors, saying this is kind of what we're going for. It's, as you know, if you've seen both films, there's no thematic similarity. It's just that Kiyoshi Kurosawa is the master of creating dread from nothing. He can make you feel. I mean, I'm just even getting goosebumps just even thinking about Cure, about some of the scenes. And I've seen it several times and I don't get to the end of it. You can never, because there's nothing to figure out, you never get bored with it. There's no secret at the middle of it. It's a mystery, but it's a scary mystery about humanity. And those are massive. Andrei Zhivovsky, who made Possession, also. Although, the thing is, nobody can make being influenced by Zhivovsky is kind of strange because you can't be. His films are so. No, I couldn't make films like him. I've got a friend who worked with him for a number of years and told me a lot about how he worked. And I'm like, I could never work like that. He creates an atmosphere of huge tension and chaos on the set, and everybody's feeling off balance and everybody feels paranoid. And I'm like, no, no, I like people to be happy. I can do that. But But you know, I love his movies all the same, and you can probably see there's definitely some Zhuavsky in my film. So you know, those are kind of the principal ones. But you know, I love Romero, I love Carpenter, I love Cronenberg, I love Jean Rollin, I love Jess Franco. You know, there's so many. You know, there's an American filmmaker, not a genre filmmaker, called Mickey Reese that I absolutely love. He's a low budget filmmaker from Oklahoma. I just watch movies from all over the place, and I just
Mm,
take what I can. You know.
very cool.
So, Paul, I have a question about the character of Agnes, as played by Catherine Siggins.
Yeah.
She feels like she's based on somebody that you actually met. So, I guess there's a little bit of a two-part thing here, where it's like I I know this is obviously based on a somewhat of a real subculture, but what is your experience with that subculture? And also, is Agnes based on somebody to any degree that you met? She just feels so like
Yeah.
I'm taking this person and putting them in this movie because God damn it, they fit.
That's wild. No, she's kind of based on actually what it is. Again, it's Cronenberg. It's characters like Patrick McGowan in in The Brood, or is it Scanners? It's Scanners he's in. Yeah, he has this kind of like he's kind of the avuncular father figure of this weird cult, you know, or Elias Koteas in Crash. You know, these I just love these Cronenberg figures that come along and they're kind of mysterious and they're kind of in charge, but you don't know what they're in charge of. And they have their cult, and their cult meets in weird buildings, like the way in Scanners they keep meeting in these kind of weird featureless Canadian 1970s kind of brown rooms and stuff. And I just kind of had an idea that it'd be cool to have somebody like that in the movie. And then Catherine, when she came on board, she brought a whole level of weirdness to the performance. I mean, Catherine and I went around doing some Q&As around the US last month or earlier this month, and I'm sure people were shocked when they met her or heard her speak that she's a warm, lovely, normal human being, because she plays Agnes with such weird, still kind of like snake-like reptilian poise. You know, she's almost inhuman. She rarely moves. When she does move, she doesn't do what you expect her to do. You know, I think it's a great physical performance, but it's a great compliment to the actor that you think it's a real person, because it's absolutely not. It was kind of a trope in a way that I stole because I wanted to have that kind of. I love that feeling you get in kind of Cronenberg movies of these kind of weird bunches of misfits moving around from place to place, like in Crash or in Scanners or in Existenz, you know, having their little meetings in their weird little rooms. And I kind of wanted some of that in it.
And it's interesting that you say that because when I was this it's odd to me that this film doesn't have a Wikipedia, but when I was looking online about descriptions for the film and trying to get more information just in my viewing, one of the things that kept popping up on like different websites, I think Rotten Tomatoes, their description has as them a group of two people from a what was it, something like a mysterious organization that gathers folk music. And I was like, I never considered it like a folk music. Like there was something about it that I never considered as like a mysterious organization. But hearing you say it, I was
Yeah,
like, oh, should I consider this a cult now? Because
yeah,
I'm gonna have to give them film another viewing and like think about it that way. Because
yeah,
I just was sitting there thinking in the theater, like, oh, is this like a seminar this woman hosts and like tells people how to go collect folk music?
yeah, yeah. It's a
Because I was like,
seminar.
I guess that makes sense. But just the thought of it like being like a cult organization, I was like, oh, that adds a whole different element to it. Because the whole thing of
Yeah.
them gathering and then selling it to these people, like, I guess it is kind of a cultish thing.
That's why I wondered about the reality of this kind of subculture.
Okay, I'll tell you where I took that from. I made a documentary about nearly 10 years ago now, I think, called While You Live Shine. It's streaming in various places, but what it is, it's a very different film to All You Need Is Death. But the main character, Chris King, is a guy who comes from the subculture of 78 RPM record collectors, and Chris is a
Mm.
very, very successful member of that very niche group that is able to find incredibly rare 78 RPM records is able to, even no matter how destroyed they are, he can always get the sound out of them. He can digitize it. He can release them. So he makes money out of that. And he talked to me a lot about the different types of collectors there are, and how there are collectors who, who have a lot of money, and when they find something, they will listen to it once and then put it in a vault and never play it again, and it never comes out of the vault. And I was fascinated by the idea that there's so many different ways of responding to, and they're collecting something as ephemeral as 1920s bluegrass, country, blues, whatever music. But it's achieved a kind of a huge weight culturally and financially in the world, so it becomes an object of desire and competition. So I was fascinated by the weirdness of this, these people that are so obsessed, and I just more or less kind of superimpose that on top of the existing culture of song collecting and ballad, because people do collect songs. I mean, it's, Ian Lynch would be, his PhD in folklore, he would have collected songs and done all that, but there's no money in it. It's not like a socially, it's kind of it's something people do for the love of the music. So by sort of sandwiching those two things together, I kind of created something that doesn't exist, but feels like it might exist. And then the trick is to not give too many details. So people, as soon as you put in details, people start to nitpick and go, hang on a second. So I just gave no details. And then people go like, oh, okay, I accept this completely. The trick is to be as purposefully vague as you can be. And if I'd had to put my script through a whole series of script readers, that would have been the first thing they would have told me I couldn't do. They would have said, you've got to flesh this out. You got to say how this works, how these people make money out of it, how are they monetizing it? And I'm like, I'm not interested. It's just, I want to get from A to B to C as quickly as possible. And if you don't draw attention to the gaps, people don't notice. It's like, I was watching the RoboCop documentary, which is great. And there's a bit in it where they got to the bit where Peter Weller has to take the Robo helmet off for the first time, which when you see RoboCop is one of the most amazing moments. And they had a huge problem because he could take off the helmet, but he had this chin bit which was separate, and it was like, okay, you're going to have to take the helmet off in 2 bits. And Verhoeven said, I don't want to do that. So they said, well, then the chin piece will just disappear from shot to shot. And he said, nobody's going to notice. I've never noticed. I've seen RoboCop like 40 times.
I never noticed.
Exactly. Exactly.
I never noticed that.
And just when you watch it, when you go, holy shit, man, that continuity is totally out. But people are so interested in seeing RoboCop's face that they just go, don't even notice. And that's, I think, one of the things about filmmaking. You can kind of distract people from what you don't want them to see, if you know what you're doing.
A lot of this reminds me of I think one of my favorite lines in the film is, if I'm remembering this correctly, it's like the future has been picked clean, all treasures lie in the past. And it reminds me just so much about, as you were saying, people that collect and engage in analog collection and preservation of physical media as being like not just like a major theme in the world of cinema today, but like also a horror theme that I'm seeing over and over again. And just sort of another reminder of just sort of how the streaming conglomerates are, essentially, gutting analog fish and burying them in a digital ditch. So, just curious, like, because I guess in that regard, there is a connection between this film and your documentary. It's just wondering, like, your sort of thoughts on, do you see like the importance of analog media and preservation as being a driving force behind your work?
Not behind my work specifically. I mean, the thing is, I've got friends who are archivists, and I know very, very well how much very recent art, film, whatever, is in danger of disappearing completely into the digital dark ages as hard drives become obsolete and browsers and operating systems become obsolete. And fundamentally, if you want your film to survive, the only thing to do is to shoot it on 35mm film. I can't afford to do that, so I make my films digitally. So, there's also an element of what will survive is what deserves to survive. I'm kind of like, there's so many extraordinary lost movies in the 1920s and 30s constantly coming up. Like there's finally the full version of Abel Gance's 5-hour Napoleon movie is finally going to be premiered this year after being missing for like since 1927, 29. Nothing gets lost. So in a way, it's sink or swim. I wish I had the ability to future-proof my work, but all we can do is work with what we have. I do find the fetishization of film that's happening right now, and even of VHS and cassette tape, a bit mystifying, because I love film, but at the same time, we have kind of moved into a world where shooting on film is a luxury and almost and a privilege. And yeah, some things deserve to be shot on film, but not everything, and it's kind of like, yeah, I wonder sometimes about whether it's holding people back from doing the best work they can on digital. They think that it's not, that it's in some way second best. It's just another way of making movies, in the same way as digital recording and analog recording are different ways of recording music. They both have pluses and minuses.
Yeah, well said.
Very well said.
But I feel like you're definitely showing us a way into the future. I don't know how exactly you use that, but I took from it a great sense of relief almost, because there is this digital apocalypse I feel like looming, especially if you're a film fan and all this, just the stuff where as the gatekeepers as the digital gatekeepers can disappear anything at any time.
Oh yeah.
There was a moment a couple years ago, I hadn't watched The Burning in forever. It popped up on Shudder. It was during the pandemic. I threw it on, and it had been so long since I'd watched it that when the credits came up and it said written by Harvey Weinstein,
yes.
I went immediately and ordered the Blu-ray, because I was like, we're at a point, not just like people can say, get rid of this, it's offensive because of who's involved. And that freaking terrifies me, right? Like,
yep.
There are movies like American Beauty that I just think they can't go away, but there's a climate, and then also just the digital thing. Things disappear, So I felt like your movie kind of somehow gave me like a balm for that feeling. And I guess this isn't so much a question, it's just a thank you, because you made me feel like it will persevere. The things we love will persevere.
Yeah, nothing ever really goes away. It's like, if, as I say, if something deserves to survive, it'll survive. But also, as you say, buy physical media. I mean, I find it one of the heartening things about the film scene, and particularly the genre film scene at the moment, is that companies like Severin and Vinegar Syndrome are doing amazing work and also making really good money. I mean, I know Vinegar Syndrome are making enough money to start producing their own movies, which are actually good, and I'm really enjoying seeing their output. And the fact that they can do that on the basis of people buying box sets and buying it gives me a lot of hope, because I'm a huge physical media collector, and I watch stuff on streaming all the time, but it's ephemeral. It will disappear, as you point out. It can be taken away at any moment. So I'm I can't go into details, but All You Need Is Death will get a Blu-ray release later in the year, and I'm absolutely thrilled about that, because I feel it's a film that, um, I think it'll be a good thing to own, and we'll have a lot of extras and a lot of cool stuff on it, and I just really feel happy. I don't think a film feels like it's a real film until it's available physically in some way, as opposed to as a stream of pixels.
Well
That
said.
totally makes sense. And I mean, it's something that I will certainly buy on Blu-ray. And um, you're right. I mean, the thing about digital media is that I mean, it's nice because we can distribute it pretty easily. You can get it out a lot more people can get it and see it. And like, I have told so many people about this film, and I'm like, and now that it's on streaming, I'm like, go watch it, go rent it. And, it's for the price of a movie ticket. You can own it streaming, just buy it. But I know part of the problem with streaming and purchasing something is that sometimes you can purchase something, and then if the company changes, or
Or the licensing.
the
Yeah.
license to it, you can suddenly just lose the film. Something you paid for to own is no longer there in your library. And so it is better to have the physical media if you can get it. And like, Severin is great because I purchased oh my goodness, I blank on the title, that Jodorowsky
Santa
film,
Sangre.
Santa Sangre, when it came out, because that's a fucking great movie and it deserves to be owned, and like more people should watch it. But yeah, I mean, it's great that there are people out there that are doing that like companies that are going like, okay, well, has been gone. We're gonna offer it, if only for a limited time, just to get it out there, because stuff does it doesn't disappear completely, but it's gone, and like you have to like hunt it out. That's always been one of the things about film that has been true. I mean, like I told Sean years ago when I first became a Lynch fan back in the mid '90s, I was seeking for a while Eraserhead, and before he put it out on himself on his own website and became largely available, I had to find it at a local video store. I brought home the copy that I borrowed. I set up two VCRs
You
and
dubbed it.
I dumped it onto a tape. And on that
I've
tape,
done that.
So
I
have
also
I.
got a copy of Un Shin Andaloo, just so that I had these two movies on this tape because I was like, I don't know when I'm gonna have it again, so I'm gonna have it on this
Mm.
tape.
Man, the quality of those VHS to VHS. I mean, I'm sure David Lynch would not be happy with the quality of VHS to VHS dub, but it was all we
No.
had. We had to live with it.
Yeah.
That's true. But I mean, when you want something, you want something. You got to have it,
Oh man,
And it
absolutely.
was out
It
of
was
print
all
for
we had.
so long, like 20
Yeah.
years. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you can get the physical media of something, grab onto it and hold on to it because you never know. I mean,
Well, I think people of our age who remember the era of scarcity when a film would come out to the cinemas and then that was it. You might catch it on
Hmm.
TV, but there was no way. Pre VCR, and I'm old enough to be just about pre VCR. You could just tell your friends this film was amazing. It had this bit. This guy walked through a wasteland and his hair was weird, and they're like, "You're a fucking idiot." But it was like you can't actually show them the movie you're talking about, so you have to describe it, and it's not really going to work. So, I think growing up in that time of scarcity makes you all the more eager to kind of hang on to things now. And you kind of go,
Yeah.
like, I've got all my box sets. I'm looking up my Fassbender, my Hammer, my Columbia Noir, my Incredibly Strange Films, Ray Dennis Steckler, Andy Milligan, all these box sets on my shelf. And I'm like, I'm so happy I have those, even though I'm probably never going to watch half of them again. But, I own them and yeah, they can't be taken away unless, act of God, maybe.
You can watch them whenever you want.
Exactly. That's the point.
I've always had a library fetish, and it's like I do reread things and I rewatch things, and it gets harder and harder to carve out that time as the streaming. Like there's so much accessible,
Mm.
but I still do, and I just like I like being able to look at the shelf, and part of that is like a fetish thing,
Oh
I
yeah,
guess, But
it's great.
it just feels it just feels good, and I guess future generations look at it and they don't get it. But I'm not going to be one of these people that says my generation is better than theirs. It's just a
No,
difference.
yeah,
But
yeah.
Yeah, but library cataloging like that is inherently gothic, and by gothic I don't mean like Robert Smith makeup. I mean like early
yeah,
19th century.
sure.
Mary Shelley and Emily Dickinson just like were hanging out in libraries reading about like whatever the fuck they can get their hands on. So it's just like that kind of I don't want to say hoarding of material, but just like the idea of like anyone can be an archivist and using that to their advantage, just has its roots, in horror anyway. So it all kind of
Oh
comes
yeah.
full circle, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. And it just,
yeah,
as you're saying, I feel happy to have all this stuff. I can show it to my friends. I can, streaming is all very well, but doesn't feel like a real thing to me. It feels like it could be taken away from us at any moment. So,
Yeah,
long live
that's
cinema,
true.
long live physical media.
I will say also, I can't tell you how many times a couple years ago, I remember like meeting a couple younger people at work in a different department and talking to them, and they were into movies, and I would mention a movie, and they'd be like, they come back the next day and like, I can't find that, and I'd be like, well, I have a disc, I can lend it to you, and they'd be like, oh, I don't have anything that plays a disc. I'm like, I guess you'll never see the fucking movie then. I don't know what to tell you.
As a professor, I run into the same thing. I've got like for several of my classes, I have like a library of Blu-rays that I'll like have to loan out to kids, like to my students for like, an assignment. And they're like, oh, I don't have anything to play that on. I'm like, what? It's like
Hmm.
you can't go into the library and use like like to the media center and use like the TV there with like the Blu-ray player. I don't know how it works.
Well, you see, the thing is, we've been moved without knowing and without consent into an economy of renting everything. Everything is subscription. And I don't want to subscribe. I want to own things. I don't want to
Yeah.
have I don't want to be paying rent to watch Jaws for the rest of my life. I want to own a 4K copy of Jaws I can put on anytime I like. And, this benefits the copyright holders. It doesn't benefit you or me. It benefits, It's completely imposed from the top down. Nobody asked for this shit.
Well, the one thing we seem to know about techno-capitalism is that they're the champions at fixing shit that ain't broke.
Yeah. And the other thing is, Paul, I would say not only have we we did not ask to be moved to this subscription streaming thing, but now I'm furious right now. I mean, Amazon, you got a year, I can list all the things about it, what makes it a shitty company. But the giant long con, when I got Prime in 2016, there were all these movies available. Whenever I go on Prime now, okay, this movie's on Prime. No, it's not. It's on fucking Freevee and there's ads. And now even
Oh yeah.
Prime, the shit on Prime has ads. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to watch a movie like John has been talking about Shogun. I can't find a fucking way to watch it without commercials.
Oh my God, no, you can't watch Shogun with commercials. It's a masterpiece, but you have to find a way of seeing it without. But this is the thing. They've reinvented broadcast TV with commercials, except now it costs you a lot more money to watch it. We've been
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
bait and switch.
It's
You know
fucking
what's funny?
insidious.
You know what's funny, Paul, is that you mentioned that, and like before there was even streaming, I don't know if you remember this, but when they had Blu-ray and then they had that other red disc, I think it was called HD disc.
Yeah.
They're one of the big supporters at the beginning of that HD disc was Lucas, and he was like, "I'm going to put Star Wars out on that," and everyone was like, "What about Blu-ray?" And he was like, "No, I'm going to use this HD disc." And the reason he chose that was because something about how you could buy a movie and you could watch it like something like 3 to 5 times, and then after that, you had to pay to watch it every other time.
What?
Holy shit.
And everyone was like, "This is bull. I'm not doing that." And that was one of the reasons that disappeared, was because it had that attachment to it. And people who
Wow.
had like rights to things like Lucas and other people who were like, "Oh, that's great because I can just keep making money off my movie, even if you buy it from me." People were like, "No, I want to own this and I want to be able to watch it whenever I watch it. Like, this is crap. I'm not supporting that." And that was about 20, no, more than 25 years ago, probably about 30 years ago, like in 97, 98. And then it failed because of that. And people stuck with Blu-ray. But
Hmm.
they slowly got us into that, and we didn't even realize it. And people
Yep.
lost the ability to really own something unless they have physical media and like just be able to watch it whenever they want to. So it's interesting that they still accomplished what they wanted to, but it just
We're
took a
just the
while.
lobster. We're just the lobster in
Yeah.
the pot. They turn the heat up slowly. You don't notice, and suddenly we're getting boiled. And we've been boiled.
And just to add to the thing that you were saying of like describing movies, man, I spent the better part of the late 90s, early 2000s telling people about the werewolf birth scene in Howling 4, the marsupials,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and people
yeah.
looking at me and going, "Was this like a weird fever dream or something? Are you talking about a real movie?" I'm like, "No, this is a scene in a movie. It's batshit crazy, but you have to see it." And they were like, "I don't, you made this up." And I'm like, "No, no, I guarantee this exists. Someday you will see it and you'll be like, Ray was right." But people would just look at me like I was nuts. And I was like, "No, it exists. It's real. It's out there. Trust me." But because the film was so hard to find for so long, everyone just thought I was nuts.
Yeah, that's the way it was.
Paul, you've mentioned Cronenberg an awful lot today, and I'm just curious what your favorite Cronenberg film is.
Holy shit, that's a good one. Man, one film. Shivers, Scanners, very good. Okay, well, I mean, if I had to pick one that I could watch right now for pleasure, it would be Existenz, because I think Existenz is really good,
Good
really
choice.
Good
original,
call.
really funny, very Philip K. Dick. I mean, I loved Videodrome, was a huge movie for me growing up. I'm not sure it's aged as well as it could, and I'm not talking about James Woods. It's separate the art from the artist, and also he's playing a fucking schmuck, so it's fine. But it's just that I think for pure pleasurable watching, I love Existenz. I'd actually really like to see Crimes of the Future again right now because
Yeah.
I found it fascinating and weird, and I love Cronenberg going into his back to his really weird roots. But it's really hard to say because there isn't really a bad one. Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but yeah, those two. If I had to just left field choices, but Shivers, Scanners, um, Crash. Man, there's so many great films, so I
Yeah,
find it hard to pick.
yeah.
And would you say have you gotten into his son's footwork? Because that's pretty good too.
I love his son's work. In fact, the VFX guy Dan Martin, who has been working with Brandon Cronenberg a lot on Infinity Pool and on Possessor, was the first. He was the first VFX person I contacted for my film, and he we've become very good friends, but he was too busy to do it. And I love watching Dan's work on, particularly on those films. I mean, Dan's a great VFX artist, but when he works with Cronenberg, they seem to make the most insanely messed up stuff. And I just
Yeah.
love, I love watching a movie where I really don't know where it's going to go, and that's what you get with Jordan Cronenberg, with Brandon Cronenberg. Sorry, you
Yeah.
kind of you feel like he's interestingly working within some of the areas his father worked in, but he's really pushing out on his own in different ways. So, yeah, huge fan.
Nice. Yeah,
Nice.
the Infinity Pool actually Infinity Pool I feel like is a movie that is synonymous in my head with Existence because I feel like both they're just so insanely sexual in these ways that are like I don't know that I should find this sexy, but I do.
They're also kind of funny
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well,
in a weird way.
especially Existence with the just the
Oh man, the scene where
yeah,
Willem Dafoe jacks into uh, Jude Law's spine is one of the funniest things. It's so weirdly homoerotic and really
yeah.
awkward. I love it. Love it.
Paul, so before we wrap, because I don't want to take up, well, guys, do you have any other questions before
I just
we
have one more question, and it's I think it's a good ender question. So in contacting you, you said you were writing, and I'm just curious, like, all right, can we look forward to more horror from you? Because I know this was like I know you like documentary filmmaker and everything, but
Yeah.
are we gonna is there more like genre filmmaking probably coming from you? And I sure hope so. And
I love making. I mean, I've had the most amazing time making documentaries. I've made TV drama, produced and directed, but I love making horror movies. And the fact is, I feel like I've kind of tapped into an area that hasn't really been exploited. I mean, it's an interesting time in horror because we've got, on the one hand, there's a lot of very meta stuff happening. Like, I really like that movie Freaky from a couple of years ago. I like,
yeah.
there's Peter Kotlovsky's just made this, produced this film, which is like a first-person serial killer film. What's it called? Something Violence. I can't remember the
oh,
name. Do you know
in
what?
a Violent Nature.
In a Violent Nature. Yeah, I'm really
Ooh,
excited
I
to
want to
see
see
that. But
that.
that isn't kind of where I liked. That's not where my thing is because that's quite. They're going into the genre and finding meta ways to kind of plumb the cliches, and I'm kind of going, I'm kind of I think I have access to a lot of stuff here in Ireland that hasn't really been put on screen. So I'm working through certain aspects of recent Irish history that I think play very well into a kind of a folk horror um, sort of form. So I'm kind of having a lot of fun with that. I'm halfway through writing a script at the moment that I think is going to be uh it's gonna certainly make some waves. It's kind of I'm not going to talk about it because it's in the middle of I'm in the middle of writing it, but it's certainly it's in the same vein as All You Need Is Death, but a lot more um potentially commercial, but also potentially quite uh it might piss a lot of people off. So I'm interested in that. I'm interested in being in that area where you can kind of yeah, it could be fun. You've just given me an idea, so I'm gonna end up by asking you guys a question. You tell me if you can answer this. Okay. Do you know what the connection is between Abigail, the Pope's exorcist, and Cocaine Bear?
No, but I'm definitely curious.
No, is this a setup for a joke? Because
You
I hope
will
it is.
you will
I
not believe. Okay, they
bated
were
breath.
all filmed in Ireland.
Really?
Yes,
What?
yes. Cocaine Bear, Pope's Pope's exorcist. There's Naples and Rome exteriors, but every time they go into a room, it's fucking Dublin. And Abigail, yeah, and also the new Nicolas Cage film, Arcadian. Man, nearly every kind of horror movie, mid-range horror movie coming out now, every second one is shot in Ireland. I don't know what's happening. It's crazy. But, that's
Wow,
something
that's
for your
awesome.
listeners to blow your listeners' minds.
That's
They
fantastic.
might
Ireland's
just
gorgeous. Wow.
Ireland's absolutely fantastic. Maybe they just see it Ireland is haunted, and maybe they just want to soak up
Yeah,
the
sure.
the juice like a
I think it's a
sponge.
lot more to do with tax breaks, to be perfectly
Yeah.
honest.
That's
But
true.
that flavor does come through though, I think, for sure.
yeah.
And I mean, I spent some time there and I don't know. So let's just end, Paul. If you could, anything that you want to say about All You Need Is Death for the listeners, and B, recommend one of your, because I don't know your other work at all. I come into this just openly ignorant, but I want to know more, and I'm sure people that see All You Need Is Death will want to know more. So if you could, whatever you want to say about your current movie, and what movie should people watch also?
Oh man, okay. Well, all I can say about All You Need Is Death is, like I say, it was a very personal small film we made for a tiny amount of money in 15 days in the freezing cold winter in January. And, I mean, I'm just thrilled that people like it. And, I'm just
Days.
like, honestly, the
Crazy.
enthusiasm that you guys are showing for it is really giving me a lot of heart and a lot of hope. And it's great. In terms of my other films, I don't know, because it's hard they're all streaming in different places. I hope they're available in the US. I know, the film I mentioned earlier, While You Live Shine, which is a very different film. It's a very life affirming film about the longevity of a mountain in northern Greece, but I had a lot of fun making it. That's on Amazon Prime, I think. I've got a film called Very Extremely Dangerous, which was basically me traveling around with a psychopathic, drug addicted ex rockabilly singer Jerry McGill for about 3 months. You can get that from that streaming, or you can get actually buy the DVD from Fat Possum Records, who distribute it in the
Oh,
US. That's a film that has a lot of dark and edgy material in it. It's not a horror film, but there's a lot of it's definitely the closest I've come to dying while I was making a movie.
Whoa.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've made a bunch of documentaries. None of them are particularly adjacent to the genre, but I guess it's interesting looking back from having seen All You Need Is Death. You might see threads and things in there connecting them to the later work. I don't know, but all I can say is it's more fun going to horror movie festivals than it is going to documentary festivals.
I would wager that that is exactly correct for everybody that has had those experiences.
Yeah,
Uh,
not many people have moved from documentary straight into horror, but maybe I'm the only one. But yeah, that's my read anyway.
I mean, we focus on horror, but I also like to, I'm not single-minded. I don't think any of us
Yeah.
are. And that's why I just wanted, the one about the rockabilly singer, that's the one I had kind of pegged on your IMDb that I really wanted to see next. So that's probably where I'm going.
Well, if you like music, there's a free CD of really good music that the guy was involved with over the years that never came out as part of the. You can get the DVD from Fat Possum for $10,
Okay.
I believe, which is a bargain.
I'll probably
Yeah.
order that today. But just, thank you so much for coming and talking to us.
Yes.
And thank you for the movie because, like I said, I feel like it really put wind in my sails for a lot of reasons. Some of them because I love eerie, spooky stuff, as I think we all do. But also, I don't know, I think it's an important flick. And folk horror got kind of a resurgence, a couple years ago. I hope that really works in your favor. And while I don't think you can limit this film to being just that genre, it's the most folk horror movie I've seen, a modern movie I've seen in quite some time. So
Right.
I don't know. I think that the audience will grow, and I wish
Thank you.
you the best of luck for everything you
Thank
do
you.
going forward.
And please support XYZ Films releases because they really love cinema. They love genre cinema, and they're going to keep supporting films like mine as long as they're able to make money out of it.
Right on. Yeah, Brooklyn
Yeah.
45 was
Yeah.
one in my top 10 last year. I love that movie.
Ted Geoghegan, amazing guy.
Oh
Yeah.
God, I
And
fucking love that
Paul,
movie.
if I can just, again, thank you so much for coming on. I can't thank you enough. I mean, I love the film. The whole reason I wanted to have you on is just to hype the film and just for more people, more eyes to see it. I have been personally paid for 3 different people in my life to just rent the movie and watch it. I'm like,
Wow.
please, here's the money. Hey, I'm paying for you to watch it. Please watch it. It's so good. Just because I want more, just because I feel like if more people's eyes will see it, then more people will tell other people to watch it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ray. That's really kind of you. I love that.
And
Really.
I just love the film so much. I mean, even though in that first viewing, but like I as a just a film geek who was sitting in a movie theater, loving a movie, I appreciate so much that you kept an 8-month long promise to somebody to come on a podcast and talk about a movie that I just loved. So
Thank
thank
you
you
so much.
so much.
Thank you
Thank you
guys.
so
I really
much, Paul.
appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks,
All
Sean.
right.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Ray.
A pandemic of violence floods the streets of major cities as cases of the media-dubbed murder virus, MV20, soar, causing those infected to go on killing sprees. Caught in the middle, police detective Angela Miller finds her only trustworthy ally in the self-proclaimed psychic PI, Gerald Henry. As the two try to navigate the violence, they are drawn into New Age guru Abramelin Harvest's plot to heal the planet. Harvest's missive?
The world is sick, and humanity is the infection.
The cure? Murder. From the twisted mind of Sean C. Baker, author of A Collection of Desires and Shadowplay in Book 1, Kim and Jesse, comes his most vicious novel yet, Murder Virus.